Woke up early in the morning, grabbed my coffee, now I'm roaring, ready to face the day and getting shit done in business.
Welcome to the Getting Shit Done in Business podcast, where we meet with industry experts to dive deep into topics that will help propel your business forward, whether that be in the realm of operations, technology, or marketing. I'm your host, Celine Hogue, and today I am meeting with Dennis Kraft, who is here to talk all about cybersecurity and cybersecurity training. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dennis.
My pleasure, Selena. Thank you so much for having me.
So I'm just going to start off by giving you an opportunity to introduce yourself, because you actually have a really kind of interesting background, and I'm probably not going to tell it as cool as you will. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you came to start cybercraft training.
Sure, yeah. So I started as an officer in the United States Army. I was with the 101st Airborne Division for a number of years at Fort Campbell. After I transitioned from the military, I became a contractor with the Department of Veterans Affairs, and then later the Department of Homeland Security. I was a contracting officer, contractor, program manager, several different roles within those organizations for over a decade. And then I decided to start Cybercraft to help bridge the cyber skills gap, cybersecurity and cybersecurity certifications. And I've been doing that ever since, and I'm having a great job doing it.
Awesome. So, I mean, just something that pops into my mind is where does this cyber skills gap come from? Because I know cybersecurity, it's like one of those buzzwords that's always on people's mind. When you think of like careers to go into, computer science and digital technology and you know, that whole kind of online realm, it's a huge industry. So where does this gap come from?
Well, there's just so much technology out there. Most organizations have some sort of IT infrastructure, some sort of cloud infrastructure that needs secured, and there just aren't enough talented individuals to secure those systems, to secure those cloud technologies, or monitor those systems effectively to help prevent cyber attacks. So there really is a huge need for cybersecurity trained professionals at every level of the organization, whether it's a small company, medium, or a large company, for the government, for private sector. And it's really a huge need for that skill set. And that's where we try and bridge that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I bet even like every single year, cybersecurity probably changes as like hackers get smarter, they get more advanced, they try new techniques, they think of new ways to try and infiltrate. So how do you stay ahead of that? And how do you train people to stay ahead of that?
Absolutely. It's challenging, especially, with AI becoming more and more prevalent. In cybersecurity, we've had AI with our systems for decades, but now as the public's become more aware and AI is becoming more sophisticated, it's possible for hacking groups to even write malicious code using AI programs. So they can maliciously create code, they can alter their code with the assistance of AI, and they can run automated scripts to target companies at any level. And hackers, they don't really care who they target. They'll target hospitals, they'll target pension funds, they'll target small companies, large companies, whoever they can get a hold of, they'll try and infect with their malware. Oftentimes, one of their major attack vectors is through ransomware, where they will encrypt an entire portion of your data and then demand a payment in some sort of cryptocurrency to decrypt that data. It's never really a good idea to pay that ransom, because you are never sure that you're going to receive your data back, if it's going to be decrypted, one, and even if it is decrypted, if it's not going to be corrupted in some way from that ransomware process. So it's usually the best defense is to restore from your backups if possible. Even if the hackers are doing a double extortion attack where they're threatening to release your data, it's much better to work with agencies like CISA or work with a trained cybersecurity professional to help restore your network rather than paying that ransom. But yeah, the need is great for cybersecurity, and unfortunately, there's just too many hacking groups out there that are skilled and effective that make that need where it is.
Yeah. So I mean, like once you've been hacked, once they already have your data, hopefully you have the systems in place where you have those backups, you have that ability to recover your data on your own. Because it sounds like it's, this is like such a cliche, but the best offense is a solid defense. It's really about being prepared ahead of time, right? Rather than waiting till you're hacked and then scrambling to try and figure out what to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. It does help to put these systems into place ahead of time. It helps to have things like multi-factor authentication on all of your key accounts. It helps to train your employees, your company to protect against phishing attacks. There's sophisticated social engineering attacks. I'm sure we're all familiar with, spam emails or phishing emails that are obvious to spot, but advanced hacking groups will do more targeted phishing attacks or social engineering attacks where they call an employee, they trick them into revealing some sort of login information, or they convince them that they're a trusted vendor of some sort. So the good hacking groups will have more sophisticated attacks that will specifically target your organization. And those are really difficult to defend against unless you have that proper training.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, everybody knows not to fall for like the Nigerian prince inheritance scams, but I've even seen ones where, I've been added to a client's internal system or whatever, and I immediately get an email or sometimes a text says it's from like the CEO or whoever that like needs you to go buy some gift cards and immediately like send you the numbers and the codes. Or, it looks like it's from someone you trust. And, I just out of curiosity one day I texted back and I was like, okay, well, can we, hop on a Zoom call and talk about this? And he says, oh, I'm in a meeting with 6 key stakeholders, so I need this right now. I don't have time to chat. Or, they like kind of run it down. And especially I've heard of people fall for this who are like maybe newer admins or people who are like legitimately worried about upsetting the CEO. And so they do it, which is, it's like it's a sneakier one, right?
Yeah, there's those are they take advantage of urgency, authority. They try and claim that they're somebody higher up in the organization. And then there's even the more subtle attacks, man-in-the-middle type of attacks where hackers can intercept a message, like say a authorization to your bank to release funds or transfer funds, alter the message itself. It'll still be from your CFO. They'll change that message, the nature of the message, change the banking details, and then forward the message along to the bank, for example. And the bank receives that message, looks the same as a message your CFO might approve on a regular basis, just the key details are changed, unless the bank sends back a confirmation email or something to that CFO. The CFO would never be aware that the message was altered. And that's a pretty common one. It's a very lucrative one as well.
So how do you protect against that?
Well, and that's those types of attacks. You'll need to have some sort of network monitoring or cybersecurity solution on your network, for example, depending on what you use for your mail server or if you have a cloud-based solution. So that's more of a technical cybersecurity aspect, not much to do training-wise to protect against that. The text messages you mentioned, that can best be resolved or protected against through proper training, proper user training to identify and protect against those threats, avoid those or forward those to your IT team. And not every organization is going to have a dedicated cyber team or a dedicated IT team, but it's important to pick a trusted, usually a managed service provider, MSP, to help provide you with that cybersecurity outreach if you need it. So it's a very helpful tool as well to have.
That makes sense. So I know you train individuals on administering, higher level cybersecurity. Do you also do that team training on like the don't click on the free cruise ship link and that's just a bad example, but things like that? Do you do those team trainings as well?
Yeah, we do. We do cybersecurity awareness training, and usually that's a yearly requirement if an organization has to adhere to a certain framework, maybe HIPAA or Sarbanes-Oxley, or have to have a SOC audit. They'll have to have some sort of cybersecurity awareness training. We always try to make that awareness training very interesting, very intuitive, hands-on. A lot of times training nowadays takes the form of just a click-through presentation online. not very effective. We always like to have some sort of live demonstration, live talking points, discussion, and usually something that's memorable for the employees so they get something out of it and not just to check the box, because that
Yeah.
defeats the purpose of the training. But yeah, we primarily focus more on certification training through certification bodies like ISACA, IC2, CompTIA, EC Council to train individuals to become maybe certified hackers, certified ethical hackers, or get their CISSP certification or their CompTIA Security Plus to enter the field of cybersecurity, or experienced individuals in cybersecurity domain maybe specialize and become a certified systems auditor, a CISA with ISACA, or a certified information security manager, a CISM, to lead those security teams. So that's where we primarily focus our efforts. We have a lot of government clients, a lot of government contracts that we help with, and a lot of corporations that help qualify those corporate teams to win those contracts and assist with that cybersecurity effort.
That makes sense. I have questions about government cybersecurity, but first I need to know, what does it look like to go through a certification to become a hacker?
Yeah, so there's a lot of great certifications out there for that. There's the EC Council Certified Ethical Hackers, probably the best starting level certification. What that training will involve is going through and learning the tools that hackers use to perform these attacks, to actually create malware, to inject that malware into a network, to cover your tracks, to scan the network, enumerate the network to figure out where you can exploit or where you can navigate to in that network, to modify the audit logs, the monitoring in that network to cover yourself to ensure that you're not detected, and also to exfiltrate that data to do ransomware types of attacks. So the idea here is if you understand how the hackers actually go through the attacks, you'll understand how to protect against that. And there's a whole field in cybersecurity called penetration testing, where you actively try to exploit a network to reveal the weaknesses, reveal the vulnerabilities within that network to help an organization protect itself.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, that's only going to be as effective as how skilled your hacker is trying to get in. Because if you have like a mediocre hacker and everyone who's actually trying to get into your system is way more clever, you're going to miss a lot of the gaps for sure.
Exactly, right.
So before we started, I asked you this, but now that we're recording, I'm really curious, what is kind of the difference in terms of cybersecurity needs and the types of threats between, like medium businesses to, government, military, even like very large corporations that hold a lot of data? What are the differences between those?
Well, a lot of the same techniques and strategies are going to be the same. Obviously, the budget is going to be different between a large organization or a government agency, a large corporation, and a medium or small sized business. But the difficulty, I think, it scales with size. You need more people, you need a larger budget for a larger organization, but the same techniques, at the same time, a small business is going to have a smaller footprint, so it can be much easier to protect that. Really, the basics are to keep your data when it's at rest, when it's stored somewhere in an encrypted state, to use secure passwords, to not store your passwords in an open area, to use passwords of a certain complexity. It's very easy for hackers to break passwords that are a very short length. 10 characters or less is not sufficient anymore. I recommend 14 or more characters with uppercase, lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols. Makes it much harder for hackers to break those passwords. And of course, multi-factor authentication. You don't want to rely on just one form of authentication. A good way, if you're logging on to your server as a business owner, you should have some form of authenticator app or maybe a text message sent to your phone. Some form of multi-factor authentication. And when I say multi-factor authentication, that's going to be something you have, like a smartphone, smart device, or authenticator app, or a hardware token, and something like a password. You can also have biometrics. That's something you are, but that's a little more expensive and not really necessary. So yeah, that's a great basic technique. ensuring that your servers, your website is patched properly. You're installing security updates on a regular basis. That's very important because those updates are usually evolve around security. So the reason you have so many updates is because there's been a security flaw usually, and that's been addressed and identified and fixed in that patch. So doing that proper patching, it can be helpful to have a MSP or an expert help with that process, ensuring your system's up to date, your infrastructure is protected, and it's important to have one that fits your budget. But it is important to address it in some form. If you don't address it, it doesn't mean you're not at risk. Yes, hackers will target any size company they can, whether it's a small business, a local government, a school, a hospital, whatever they can do to make a quick buck. So that's what they're going to do.
That makes sense. I hear a lot from kind of smaller businesses that saying, oh, hackers don't care about me. So they're really lackadaisical about their security. Like they turn off the multi-factor authentication because they're sharing accounts to save money. They maybe have a secure password, but it's the same secure password for every single platform that they use. I've worked with a couple of businesses whose password is like the business name and then the year. And I'm always like, okay, well, what if an employee leaves and they're disgruntled? Like anybody ever can always get into your system because you have no way of changing your passwords, or clients will just like email us all their passwords to everything, or have like a Word document in like, Google Drive or OneDrive that has just all their passwords for their whole company. And I mean, I think nobody, they don't start thinking about it until they actually get targeted. And then they realize, oh, I guess we should have had security. Or a lot of times I hear, oh, I know we should get better cybersecurity, but, and then, like other problems that they think are more urgent. And it kind of boggles my mind sometimes because they're not concerned about it. So, I mean, what are some kind of easy ways? You mentioned multi-factor authentication. I know like there's things like LastPass or 1Password where you can manage passwords so that you don't need to remember 30 different 15 or 16 character passwords. What are some other ways that kind of small and medium-sized businesses can protect themselves without having to spend a lot of money or go through a lot of kind of ongoing work?
Yeah, great. LastPass has some controversy around it in regards to how secure it is. I think that's much better to use LastPass than to share the Word document with your passwords. It's important to have a password management system that makes sense for you. What I recommend is to create a passphrase. And the longer your password is, the better. And if you can incorporate, you don't want to have a short password with words in it because it can be very easy to brute force, as it's known. Attackers will run it through a special program that will be able to decrypt that password. But a longer password is very difficult to do, just the length of the password. And of course, having some uppercase, lowercase numbers, or letters, numbers, and symbols helps as well. A passphrase can be a very helpful tool where you think of a word, so we think of like your name, Selena, or, we're going to get things done on the podcast, things like that. Selena's podcast could be your passphrase, and you can have some uppercase, lowercase letters in there, and then some numbers and symbols at the end of that. But something that's easy to remember as your password, instead of just random characters, that can be something to make the password a little more manageable, easier to remember. I like to incorporate a piece of the website or the web resource into the password itself. So if I look at a website, I see the name of the resource that I'm trying to log into. I know what the password is. I have a standard template, and then I put in a piece of that name. If I'm logging on to my bank, the name of the bank, part of that goes into the password itself, and then I have a system there. So I always know what the password is based on what the resource is called. You don't necessarily have to do that, but you definitely don't want to store your passwords in Google Drive. I mean, that's not a good idea. You can quickly lose track of who you're sharing those to. If you share them like with an employee that leaves their company, they can access your information. Who knows who they've shared that to? If you
Yeah.
share it out in Google Drive, who is that? Maybe that password's been forwarded to somebody else. You're not aware of it. Who knows who has access to your password? And it's not a problem. Cybersecurity is never a problem until your system's not working, until you're locked out, until you have ransomware or there's malware on your site, or there's a data breach and now all of your customer information is being shared, and you've been hacked, and now you have to notify all your customers. It can damage your reputation. It can damage your ability to do business. So that's why it's important to take those basic steps.
Yeah, that makes sense. One password example I like to use, because it always sticks with people, is I say, think of like a song title or something you like, but then replace some of the characters or the letters with numbers and other characters. So if you're like an AC/DC fan, you can have Highway to Hell with like uppercase and spaces. Instead of the I in highway, you can have an exclamation mark. Instead of the E in hell, you can have the number 3. So you have like that kind of mix, but it's easy to remember. But I really liked your example of the template, because it's going to be a different password for each app, but still something that you can remember, which is really handy too, because I think that's kind of the biggest piece for people, is they don't want to have all these passwords that they're not going to remember, especially if you do have to, type them in manually.
Yeah, that can be pretty tough. I mean, if you have a password manager, they can be fine. I think that's a good solution for a lot of people, and it's much better than storing them on Google Drive or storing them in a Word document on your computer, because hackers can easily find that. Hackers, if they get access to your computer, they're going to have an automated tool that scans for anything that looks like a password. They're going to find something like that very quickly. So it's
don't just type it into your desktop.
I mean, honestly, that's not. I write my passwords down in a book.
Yeah.
Some logins require things that break that template that I talked about. I write them down in a book that I have in my office. The chances is, if I have somebody breaking into my office, I have bigger problems than a cyber breach. That's a fine method, honestly. I think if you want to write them down in a password book, that's fine. A physical book, that's not a bad technique in my idea. Obviously, you don't want to, if you're working in an office, you don't want to have a sticky note on your desk or something like that. But if you have, a personal book or something that you keep, that you use on a daily basis and it's always with you or something like that, or you work from home, the chances, if someone's breaking into your house, that's going to be a problem. But otherwise, that's a fine technique, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you also talked about backing up data. So if you have, ransomware or whatever it might be, you have your backups. Now, we all kind of know, if you have a server, your server will back itself up automatically, or not automatically, but you can set that up very easily. What about when you have all of your business data in the cloud on various apps? Like you might have a CRM or some, other types of cloud databases, or SharePoint or Google Drive or a project management system. When all of your data is in all sorts of different places on the cloud, is there a way to get those backups, or do you just have to have faith in the backups of those systems that you're using?
That's a great question. And, I would definitely recommend backing up things like customer data. If you have a list, like an email list, things like that, backing that up, making an offline copy. With server backups, if you have a web server and it's automatically being backed up, make sure you understand where those backups are. If your server is backing it up itself on the same server where it's hosting the files, if that server goes down, your backups aren't going to be any helpful. So it's important to download and create a task for yourself to create backups regularly, at least once a quarter, for example. There's terms such as maximum tolerable downtime, mean time to recover, things like that. We don't have to get into that, but you want to have a backup that you're going to be okay losing. So if you're okay losing a month's worth of data, then you want to make an offline backup once a month at least. Ideally, if you have a hosting company, you can have a dedicated backup server. So your backups go to the backup server. If there's ever a problem with your primary server, your backup server has your backups. You can restore your data. But it's still a good idea to make an offline backup periodically. And when I say offline backup, easy way to do it is get an external hard drive, or 2, ideally. Make a copy of your files off your computer any server files, any important files from those cloud resources you use. Not all of them you're going to be able to back up, but those that you can, and things that you might not be thinking of, like your email client. Make a copy of your emails, copy of your bookmarks. I see people when they have to reinstall their operating system, they lose all their bookmarks. It really messes because they got to regenerate those. You can easily export bookmarks, things like that, and put those on that external hard drive. Do that once a month, once a quarter, and then just store that in a physical location. Can really help you out.
That's a really good idea for sure. Especially the bookmarks. I tend to just rely on Google Chrome itself, associating the bookmarks with my Google account, but I should probably have an extra backup of them somewhere because I do have a lot of bookmarks.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I live off my bookmarks.
Bookmarks and tabs. But then when I get too many tabs, I start bookmarking. So yeah. I guess, so people who are kind of watching or listening to this episode right now, they're probably thinking, oh my goodness, here's a whole bunch of things I'm not doing. How can I learn how to do this? So I know you provide training for, service providers who are then going to go and provide cybersecurity for larger corporations or government entities. You provide kind of compliance training for teams. If a company has, say, someone on staff who kind of does like office administration, but maybe they're techie and they want to get into this a bit more, do you provide training for individuals kind of at the company level to administer cybersecurity, or do you just always recommend they outsource to an MSP who's going to just know this inside out?
Yeah, absolutely. We're happy to train small businesses or even just one or two people from a company to learn basic cyber hygiene, basic cybersecurity practices. We can usually do that over like a lunch period, do that training. And we're happy to have that training for either on-site or remote. We do that all the time for companies.
Awesome. And so I'm going to have your links in our show notes and descriptions and everything. But just in case somebody is listening and doesn't have access to this, how can someone get a hold of you or your business?
And they can go to our website, cybercrafttraining.com. Or, if you're listening to the podcast, you can contact me directly, Dennis K. at cybercrafttraining.com, and that's craft with a K. And be happy to talk with you. Even ask if you have any basic questions about cybersecurity, be happy to answer them for you. Always trying to raise awareness around cybersecurity. And I know, people, it's a complex field. So I want to make sure everybody has what they need.
Okay, and last question. I don't know if you can answer this one for like privacy reasons, but if you have a funny or horrific story to share about a cybersecurity breach, even if you change the details so it's anonymous, I would love just like one funny story to end us off.
Sure. Well, I worked with a company, my contracting company. We had a bring your own device policy, and to subscribe to the bring your own device policy, you can use your personal device for work. You'd have to have a work app that would allow you to access the work email address, the work SharePoint, things like that. Well, my buddy, he lost his phone, right? He went on a camping trip. He lost his phone. He thought he dropped it out in the woods somewhere. And he did the right thing. He called the company, he said, hey, I lost my phone. I don't know where it is. I'm looking for it. Just wanted to let you know. And the company, they had a remote wipe policy. So if every time a phone was lost or stolen, even if it was your own personal phone with a bring your own device policy, it'd be remotely wiped. So he got his full phone wiped. They wiped his phone. And a couple hours later, he found it. It was underneath the seat in his Jeep. And so he picked up his phone. He's all excited. He went to go call the company, and the phone's restarting. It's acting weird. So he used his buddy's phone. He said, hey, I found my phone. What's going on? He said, oh, yeah, we had to remotely wipe that because he told us that you lost it. So he was furious.
Oh, no, all his photos.
Yeah. He was so not really a cyber breach, but yeah, it was not a happy day. He left the company shortly after that for probably that reason.
I could see that being frustrating. I know, like, I'm just using LastPass as an example, but pretty much all password managers have this, but you can have that remote logout feature too. So if you lose your device, and I know like Google and Microsoft and all the systems have this on their end too in their admin, you can remotely see where you're logged in and log out. So you can, log out of your phone for your email and your password management system if you, don't have it set to just reset like every hour, which is very useful. Also for, disgruntled ex-employees. We had a client who they had an ex-employee who like went and I guess had written down all the passwords for the whole company. And so they, even though they had deactivated her email or deactivated certain things, she just kept getting in. And I realized because she had sent a bunch of her password resets to her personal email. So every time they'd remotely log her out, she would just like reset the password with their personal email. So I was able to go in and see that and then permanently disable those devices. And then obviously change the passwords and deactivate any access she had. But this company had no idea. They're like, she just keeps getting in. We've let her go. We changed the passwords. We've deactivated her accounts, but she just keeps getting in. So it's good to have that kind of remote access to be able to manage logins because, hopefully, most people won't have to have their phones wiped, but there's definitely options for that.
Yeah. And it's a good example with a disgruntled employee, how disruptive that can be, for sure.
Yeah, I know. People always say, oh, my team's so great. I love my team. But everyone's always harmonious and good until someone leaves. Or you never know, like somebody could be happy and bubbly and polite on the surface, but maybe they are feeling some resentment that they're not showing. Or you never know, like as you grow, you're just bound to hire people who unfortunately aren't going to have your best interests at heart once they aren't happy for some reason.
And it could even be somebody, a disgruntled boyfriend or girlfriend that's trying to get back at one of your employees and going through their accounts, finding their passwords and trying to log on to your system. It has nothing to do with you or your employee. Yeah, that's happened. I've seen that before as well. So
that's true. Or you just leave your phone on the coffee table at a party or something and somebody else picks it up.
Yeah.
It can happen, right? Yeah.
Definitely does. It definitely does. One other story I have when I was a penetration tester for one of our contracts, and what we did to target a CEO of one of the companies, that company asked for a pen test on their infrastructure. So what we did is we knew that this guy loved this certain charity and he loved this certain hockey team. So what we did is we created a special email sent to look like it's from that charity with hockey tickets for his favorite hockey team as part of a giveaway. And we sent him a PDF, fill out this sweepstakes and you can win the hockey tickets. He filled it out and we sent him the tickets. The tickets were really just a malicious PDF with some malware. So from that, we were able to access a backdoor into his computer, and then we were able to get all the files we needed. That's just an example of the level of sophistication you'll see targeting the senior executives at your company that hackers will go through. It's not going to be your run-of-the-mill phishing email. It's going to be something very specific and targeted that's almost impossible to recognize. So
100%. And even if it's not specifically targeted, just as a sports team, for example, somebody could get a hold of a list of people who, follow that sports team on social or on the sports team's email list, or, sometimes like other organizations get hacked and get these lists, but they don't, when they're large companies, ethically, they're supposed to disclose it, but not everybody does, right? So somebody may have gotten a hold of this list, but you don't know. And so they can send out these, hockey ticket sweepstakes to everyone on the hockey team list and, catch a lot of people that way, even if they're not likely high targets in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen attacks for like Twitter, for some of these major social media sites where hackers are able to social engineering and compromise a legitimate account. Like with Twitter, there's a hack, I think it was 4 years ago, where former President Barack Obama's Twitter account was compromised. And, the hackers were putting out tweets about, hey, gain more Bitcoin by sending Bitcoin to this address. And it really, they could have done a lot with that attack, but they really did a wasn't that sophisticated, the level of attack that they wanted to do
Yeah.
with the tweets. But were compromising his legitimate account, so they could have done a lot of harm. But fortunately, they didn't choose the best avenue to go about it, which is great. And it was shut down pretty quickly, but it could have been a lot worse.
They're ambitious, but not particularly smart.
They're smart in some ways, and then maybe, it's tough. It's tough to understand motivations behind a lot of these hacking groups. And a lot of cybersecurity professionals just focus their whole careers on studying these advanced persistent threats, as they're called, APTs, and learning how they operate and how to protect against them and what attacks indicate that it's from this APT or this APT. So it's a whole line of business.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Dennis. I definitely learned a lot. I'm hoping, and I'm sure everyone listening learned a lot. So I really enjoyed you showing up today.
Selena, it was wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day out there. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me. Take care.
Teamwork hard, let's make progress. Getting shit done in business.